sewing room today, and I'll be making this hexagon shaped table topper for Halloween. And the pattern kind of makes it look like a spider web. And it's made out of a width of fabric strip set cut into triangles. And to save a little time, I posted a video separately on how to construct the strip set, so I won't repeat that here. But I will show you how to cut that strip set into triangles and then form it into the table topper. So let's get started. I'll show you how to make it. Begin by choosing 6 fabrics, and you'll cut each fabric into one strip that measures 2 inches by width of fabric. And when choosing your fabrics, make sure you have some nice light and dark contrasts. And when you place them in the order that you want to create your strip set, be sure to have a light on one end and a dark on the other end. Here's the strip set that I created. And again, I did a separate video on how to create the strip set, so be sure to watch that if you're interested. And you can see I have some contrast here, 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 and then my 2 centers are kind of medium. When pressing your strip set, make sure you press your seams all in the same direction. You wouldn't want one seam to be pressed in the opposite direction, for example. After you've completed your strip set, it's important to take a few minutes and measure the width of it. And you want to make sure it measures 9.5 inches. Now, mine was a little bit wider in certain spots, and so all I did was trimmed a little bit from each side as necessary to get it to an even 9.5 inches. And I did that through the whole length of my strip set. You can see in my sample that the table topper is comprised of triangles. And there's a triangle there, and they just go all the way around. You have 6. And these are 60-degree triangles. To cut the strip set into triangles, you have options. And one option is to use your regular quilting ruler. And this particular one is 8.5 inches by 24 inches long. And I'll show you how to use that one in just a minute. I'll set it aside. Or you can use a triangular quilting ruler, and this one is a 60-degree equilateral triangle. And I'll show you that really quickly. And all you do, it has a flattened edge at the tip instead of a point, which is really nice because you can line it up with your strip set. So you would just line it up at the top and as close as you can get to your selvage, and then line it up on the 9.5 inch mark. So it's lined up here and here, and then you would simply use your rotary cutter and cut it here and here, and you have your triangle. Now, if you don't have one of these rulers, I'll show you how to use your regular quilting ruler. And you'll notice that on most rulers, they have angles marked on them. And here's the 60-degree angle that we're interested in for this project. And it's here and here. And I've just put a piece of painter's tape right under that line just so my eye can go right to it quickly. So all you do is line up your 60-degree line on the bottom of your strip set. Just line that right up, and then up here get as close to, again, your selvage as you can, and then you make your first cut right here. And then you just discard that, or if you have some use for it, go ahead and save it. Now move your ruler and remember this other 60-degree line I showed you. Now we'll line that line up. And I didn't put tape on it because I didn't want to get my ruler too crowded up. And so I'll line it up right here at the corner, and then my 60-degree line along the bottom, and cut. And you have your first triangle. And continue on and cut 5 more triangles. And so you would just flip around the ruler Again, line it up at the bottom at your 60-degree mark and at the top. And I'll continue on cutting these out. And if you really don't like trying to do this with your 60-degree angle, you can always use your triangle as a template and just line it up and cut. Simple as that. And with this strip set, you can see you have quite a bit left. So you might want to save that for another project. Now arrange your triangles into the hexagon shape, and you'll notice that you'll have 3 triangles with the light center and 3 with the dark. And that's because we started our strip set with light on one edge and dark on the other edge. And that once you put these all together, it creates a nice contrast for the center of your table topper. Now to sew these together, we'll do this half. We'll sew this half and this half together, and then I will join the 2 halves together. So all you do, right sides together, and I'll flip it over because I like to start from this end, not from the point down here. And then I will do the same thing, pin these 2 together. And this is just a rough pin. I like to pin just to indicate which direction I'm sewing. Now I'll carefully match up each of these seams. And you can do this at the machine without pinning. I'm gonna go ahead and pin just because I prefer it that way. So all you do, because of the way these were pressed, one seam will be going in one direction and the other seam will be going in the opposite direction. So they'll nest up really nicely. So you just nest up those seams and then pin. And then I'll repeat that on each of these seams. I have my 1/4 inch presser foot. I have a leader fabric so my bobbin thread won't bunch up on the back of my fabric. And I'm using a 1/4 inch seam allowance and just feed that right in. And just pull your pins out as you go. Just realign right at the tip. And I'll check and make sure everything lined up. And they look really nice. So I'll go ahead and take this to the pressing area before I attach my next triangle. Okay, I will press my seam, and this time I'm going to press my seam open. And I'll just give it a little finger press. And pressing it open at this point keeps the table runner nice and flat. Now I'm ready to attach my 3rd piece to this half. I'll do it in exactly the same way, and I'll do that off camera, and then I'll create my other half as well, and then show you how to attach the 2 halves to each other. I have my 2 halves sewn together, and this is what the back looks like with the seams pressed open. And there's a little tip there, so I'll just snip that off and even it off with my triangles, like so. That's how it looks from the front. And then I'll repeat that with this one. And now the final step for this top is to sew these 2 halves together, and it's just right sides together. And I will off camera pin at each of my seams. I have my 2 halves all pinned, and the center is the trickiest point because you want to try to match up those 2 points. And you can either eyeball it or use a pin to put it right in the very tip of your point, and then on this side do the same thing, put it right there at the tip, like so. And then I just take another couple pins on each side of that really close to keep it in place. And then I will actually push this pin down a little bit so it's not sticking out. And that gives me a pretty good chance of getting it matched up. And I don't actually worry about it too much if it's not perfect. Again, the same as before, I'll just sew these 2 halves together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Remove my pins as I go. And I'll slow down at the middle here. Make sure everything's nice and flat. There's a lot of seams going on right there. And I'll just check my seams. The center looks really nice. And these all look good. Now I'll press, and I'll do the same thing. I'll press my final seam with the seam open. Give it a little finger press. And then I'll really try to flatten out the seam right there in the center. And sometimes these will puff up a little bit in the center. This one's not really doing that too much, but if that happens, just use a little bit of starch. And it measures 18 inches in one direction and a little over 20.5 in the other direction. And I'll just give you an overview of how I finish my table toppers. You can finish yours with your favorite technique. All I do is I layer my top with a piece of batting. And in this case, I usually use Fusible Thermolam Plus. You can use any batting you like, and it does not have to be fusible. I then do some quilting, and I'll show you on my sample. All I did was some simple quilting lines around my hexagons. After I've done whatever quilting that I want, then I trim this batting all the way around even with my table topper. Then I layer it with the backing fabric, like so. So you can see this technique, the backing will not have any quilt lines on it. And I do have a video that I'll link to in my description that shows that process of adding the backing and finishing off the table topper. There you have it, a hexagon shaped table topper for Halloween. And if you start with a nice straight strip set and then cut your triangles evenly, you should have a really good result. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.